let me just ask, powerful video, right? And a way to communicate with folks, not only what the crisis is, but what some of the possible solutions are. Just for the entire audience, what's one thing that struck you about what she was describing? What's that one point that you went, gosh, I didn't think about that, or I can't believe that worked as well as it did? What one thing struck you about that video? Bingo for books, all right? Yeah, we can do that. That's an inspiring message right there. We can do that. What else struck you about that? Partnerships. Partnerships. Yeah, did you hear how she collaborated? And it was a systemic, your word, right? A systemic approach in a county that's largely rural, one large metropolitan area, $3,500, folks. $3,500. What else? There was a comment here. What struck you? Did you hear the list of possible priorities she walked through? Now think about the scarcity of resources in order to accomplish this in a community and what you have to do to work with folks and say, listen, if you'll help kids read, it's an outcome that helps you in the criminal justice system. If you'll help kids read, it's an outcome that helps you in agriculture, because they can read instructions on machineries and they can read seed instructions and they can be productive folks in our county. What else struck you about that? Yep, workshop for parents, absolutely. And we know that that partnership between parents and child is absolutely critical, and that two-generational approach is what we need to do, a long-term solution. Any just last comments? Right? And keep it self-funding, for example, with the thrift shop and the other things that happen. Good. So we wanted to show that to you very purposefully, to ask you to really think about what you heard, what you saw, and where there might be a recommendation for this commission to come forward. So one of you may say, hey, listen, we see things with small seed money that are big success, and they include partnerships, self-funding mechanisms, so on and so forth. So that's why we wanted to show that. So just to prime the pump. So what we want to do is we're going to shift gears here. We're going to have an opportunity for you all to speak, and thank you very much for being here. I'll let you introduce yourself. As you listen to our presenters, again, we're engage with them in a way, probe them, get the specifics of what they're doing, and they can help you understand what's happening and some of the other successes in the state of Georgia.
Hi, my name is Jill O'Mara. I work with Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning, also known as Bright from the Start. And we are a state agency that provides resources and administers the pre-K program and does licensing and registration for child care centers and many other things. But a lot of what we do is based on children ages birth to 5. So when you wonder, well, why am I up here? Because this is a meeting for 4th grade. But if we're birth to 5, and then if those 5-year-olds turn into 6-year-olds and turn into 7-year-olds, and then we hand them off to you all. So what we do is just as important to make sure that we're meeting the needs of you all, so that when the children get there to you all, they're ready. So having said all that, Georgia recognized that community support, community partnerships, relationships are very important. So back in 2014, Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning put together what is called Early Education Empowerment Zones. So there are 4 of these zones in the state of Georgia. One's in North Georgia, having 5 counties. There's one in Macon, Bibb County. There's one in Athens, Clark County, and South Georgia, which has 5 counties. So I am the manager of all of those 12 counties. In addition to that, I am the coordinator for 5 in South Georgia, reaching Lowndes, Brooks, Colquitt, Cook, and Eccles. A lot of rural counties down there, as you well know. So my job, one of our major tasks that we were tasked with, because we do know that healthy children and thriving communities go hand in hand. So one of our major tasks was to put together a Birth to 8 team, which would include community partners from all of those counties to come together once a month and talk about issues and concerns and needs that we have in the community and what we can do as a community to address those. And so we do in South Georgia every month, the 3rd Monday of every month we meet. And these are leaders such as pre-K directors. Superintendents come once in a while. If they don't get to come because their loads are heavy, they do meet with me and they call me. And we do communicate so we can make sure we're all on the same page. We have library systems, we have DFACs, we have Family Connection Partnerships, we have Chamber of Commerce, we have Great Start Georgia, which is a home visiting program, And we have Department of Public Health, we have a lot of agencies that attend these meetings. Very important. We have Technical College and the the University System of Georgia coming together. And so a lot of what we do is like I said, is we talk about what we can do. Well, one of the things has been part of a grant that DeKalb had, the family engagement opportunity, the community grant. There were two different ones. This is the community grant that Janet with Family Connection was able to do some wonderful things. And we're not talking about a lot of money that she had. We're talking about $10,000, which is a lot compared to what Seminole had with $3,500. But she was able to do some amazing things that we have talked about in our Birth to 18 meetings. And so in addition to what Janet's going to talk about, lastly, what I want to say is that what I do is to make sure that the resources that we have at the state level at Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning comes down to the local level, and so that we can share these resources because they are free. The resources that we have are free, and it's just a matter of knowing where to get those resources from. In addition to the grant that Janet's going to talk about, some of the other programs that we've done and she's done in Colquitt County are free. So I just want to share that with you, and welcome Janet.
I hate to follow Beth Capson. She was a really special individual and also a Family Connection Region 10 peer. And she was wonderful. I was asked to speak about some community success and why Colquitt County has been successful. And I think that a part of that is to have a goal that everybody can identify with. And our goal was reaching children so they're not behind when they start school. And we started out with this grant, which was, I had seen at a WIC program, at a WIC office meeting with them, this wonderful video, and it was called Talk With Me Baby. And I said, we want one of those. How do we get those? So anyway, had to get hold of that and then met with the hospital administrator, because how are we going to reach the mothers? Well, I thought, well, if you get them where they're stuck and they can't go anyplace else, and you have an authoritative figure saying this is what you need to do to help your children, and you see this video and you have training on it, and you get to go home with books and you get your own video to show to everybody in your household, and you have like little onesies that say this side up, and you know that this is really special, and how really important you, the mother and the caregiver, how important they really are. So we started that at the hospital, and that worked out really well. And so we had with the Talk With Me Baby. So we had that common goal. The newspapers were all over it, and because of this, the grant, to me, one of the things that's more important almost than the $10,000, that's almost, and that is everybody then, you know, you get this kind of like seal of approval, like, oh, you got a grant for this, it must be good. And so therefore, everybody pays attention, it's in the newspaper, everybody's involved. And again, I think Colquitt County is not too big and not too small. I like to think of us as the sweet spot. And you can talk to everybody, and everybody's friendly, and they know you, and they're willing to help. One of the problems that I had with the grant was people kept donating things, and you know, I had this line item for this, and they donated all this, like the electrical, and they put in flat screen TVs for free, and it was wonderful. And they didn't, like the printing, they charged like half price for the printing, and they didn't even say they charged half price, but I got quotes in advance, and then wasn't that high. So, but I mean, it's just a wonderful community that works together. And you know, I think that, Joy, one of the things that you said when people were talking about all the education that to me is really the most important is for the individual, the child that's reached, that the mother knows. Because how would any of us feel if our child, when they started pre-K, or that we found out that they were behind? We didn't know. I mean, you know, we were trying to keep them healthy and change their diapers and feed them well, but gosh, we didn't even know that we should do this. And I think that that's one of the real tragedies, is if somebody doesn't know, and they don't know what they can do for their children, and how would you feel? I mean, like, they're 2 years behind and off they start, and how does the child feel? they feel like they're stupid. That's not their fault they've never seen the alphabet or books that turn and all that. So that's what we tried to do, is to go in the very beginning. And so that's what I think that that in Colquitt County, which Beth had the nerve to mention football. Of course, you all know who the Packers are, don't you? Ooh, 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 ooh. Yep, that's us. That's the Packers. Number one, several years in a row. So, and that's where we are too. And my husband's seats are, yes, his parents' seats. One has to inherit these sort of things. You pay every year, but that's where we are, Friday night. And so that is, I think, the thing about Colquitt County is the common goal, and we all communicated and collaborated together in the coordination, and again, the currency, which was the validation. And you asked about 4 through 6, and this is really important, I think, too, and it is that Striving Readers grant that made all this difference. Dr. Marty Kirkland, our supervisor of curriculum, gave me this information, and in the birth through K, they have had the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test and the PALS screening to give them that. And in birth through, in kindergarten through 5th grade, they've also had this grant, and they have given over 50,000 books. They also, again, reaching outside of just their area, they have given books to the hospital to give to the mothers. So the baby books, they have provided those, the school system has, and they have been so helpful in everything. But this seems to be the thing that everybody wants to hear. Tell me the numbers. Okay, so the percentage of 3rd graders who were scoring at the lowest, that's the beginning readers level, was 48% at the end of 2015. After 3 years with this Striving Readers grant, it was only 36%. Now these would be different 3rd graders, you understand. So they've been in this Striving Readers program. And the future graduation class, if you will, the same group of kids that were started as 3rd graders and they were scoring at the lowest level, was 48%. And then that same group of kids, they're now 5th graders, they're now they were now down to 37%. And so, I mean, I think that we all know this is the hardest group. I mean, you know, they're already, you know, through that door and out that barn, and you're trying to still kind of harness them up as they go, because they should have gotten this early, and they didn't get this reading earlier, but they haven't let them go. They've been trying to work with the reading the whole way through. And then looking at 4th graders, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, these are last year's 4th graders, they started at 44%, and they were able to reduce that to 38%. Also, all the parents have LinkedIn information, and they can see where their children are and what they could be doing. And the Striving Readers Grant was also for the Willie J. Williams Middle School, 6 and 7. They've had the Language Arts Collection and Read 180, and that has made a big difference in their scores. The high school did not have any types of reading intervention, but through 4th through the 8th grade has made a huge difference through the Striving Readers Grant. So, would anybody have any questions?
Of all the ideas that you guys had, what was the most critical partnership that you created in getting those ideas executed?
Thanks for that. So that most important partnership, both with the public library and the hospital.
I would say the hospital first, because that's where you reach the mothers.
Good afternoon. I'm Katie Landis. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the director of the Georgia Statewide After School Network, which is a public-private collaborative dedicated to both advancing, connecting, and supporting after-school and summer learning programs across the state. I'm going to go off of really what Caitlin was saying earlier. We know there's a lot of great things going on during the school day, but our kids aren't only in schools. 75% of our children's time is spent outside of a formal classroom learning. That includes weekends, afternoons, mornings, and a big part of that, as Caitlin mentioned, was summer. There's a lot of time during the day and during the year where we can be really doing really great and engaging work with young people, or not. So that's a bit why I'm here today, to talk about after school, summer, what we can be doing with our young people. And I'm going to spend a particular focus on programs across our state who are serving those low-income communities that we talked about. We know that poverty plays a huge role into literacy, and so programs serving those communities. There's 3 things I really want to hit on today. One is that after school and summer learning programs, they do impact literacy, but even more so than that, they impact all of those other underlying factors that we've talked about, from poverty, health, social emotional learning. They really can hit on those. 2, we have some very large gaps in access to after school and summer learning programs across our state. And the 3rd one really ties back to that first one. We have some increased commitment in the public and private sectors around increasing quality of our after school and summer learning programs, which is huge because that is what gets those impacts. I'm not going to go over all of these, but these are some of the positive impacts that research does show that after school and summer learning programs can have on young people. I will make sure to point out that this is high quality after school and summer learning programs. Talk about that in a moment as to what that actually means and looks like. 3 of them that I will touch on real quickly. The first one, it says the ABCs. There's a lot of research out there that consistent participation in these programs increases school day attendance, it increases and improves classroom behavior, and it also increases the completion of homework. All 3 of those we know are linked to academic achievement, specifically literacy. The 3rd one, combating summer slide. That is exactly what you saw on Caitlin's graph that she mentioned, where the literacy rates go up every year. They dip, and they keep going up, but there's always that little piece that we have to make up each year. High quality summer learning experiences can combat that. They make it so that kids are always on the upward trajectory and therefore get to a higher level. Currently, for those kids who don't have those opportunities, particularly lower income kids, by the end of 5th grade, they can be as far as 2.5 grade levels behind their higher income peers because of the opportunities that they haven't had. And the other one that I will mention is this, productive parents. We've talked about workforce and poverty. 80% of parents in Georgia say that having access to after-school programs helps them keep their jobs. So we're not even just talking about impacts of young people, but families, communities, and employers. I wanted to specifically tie this back to literacy a bit, though I will be the first one to say that after-school programs, they don't claim the academic achievement. That's a lot of what schools do, and after-school programs help support that. But there are some instances where there's really strong connections between the work in after school and summer and literacy. The first one, you actually in your folder have a little bit summary of some of this research, but it's showing, again, the connection between these high quality, consistent participation in high quality programs has been shown to increase course grades and academic achievement. All of this hinges on what we'll talk about later in the quality piece. But then specifically looking at some programs in Georgia. The 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which is a program administered through the Department of Education. It's federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education for after school and summer learning. These numbers don't necessarily look that impressive, but I will say this is a program that every year has either 90% or higher of their kids are from economically disadvantaged communities, and they also predominantly target students who have failed or not met standards on standardized tests in years prior. And so you'll see this is actually FY17 data. So from recently, 76% of those students improved or maintained their course, their report card grades in ELA, English Language Arts, and 59% of them were either received developing, proficient, or distinguished on the ELA milestones. That is not the highest level where you want our kids, but again, those are children who had previously not met those standards. And another one, I like this, 81% of teachers and 92% of parents report increased homework completion. That's something that those parents and teachers are specifically attributing to that child's attendance in that after-school program. And I will actually note one more thing about some specific programs in Georgia. In 2015, the National After School Alliance teamed up with Dollar General to create the first Dollar General Literacy Award for after-school programs, and actually the inaugural winner of that was a program here in DeKalb County. So Georgia held the first winner, and that was a program who in 2013, they had some very targeted one-on-one supports for children who weren't meeting their literacy goals, specifically for middle school children. And at that point, 100% of those students improved at least one letter grade in ELA that year, and 97% of them were promoted to the next grade level, and these were children who were very behind in their literacy rates in the middle school years. So that's one program using evidence-based curriculum that had huge impacts. So moving on to the second piece, this access. Where are we in Georgia? According to parents, this is a study by the After School Alliance, 16% of children in Georgia are accessing enrolled in an after-school program during the year. But this next number is huge. Nearly 600,000, their parents report that they would be in a program if they had access to one. This is parent-reported data, so I can't actually speak to what they mean by when they don't have access. It might be that one physically isn't there. One might be that they don't have transportation to that program, because that is a huge issue that programs face. Or it might be that they don't deem them high quality. Just looking at this, how this access has changed over years, you'll see that bottom line is our participation in after-school programs across Georgia stayed at 16 to 17% over the last decade. That top line, that's going from 26 all the way up to 40, that is the demand. That's parents who want their kids in a program who don't have access to one. So we're staying steady on demand, on participation. That's mainly because our funding, our federal funding has stayed steady, is a big part of that. But that demand has grown and we haven't been able to keep up with that. And so when I talk about the federal funding, there's two large federal funding streams that Georgia accesses to serve after school and summer learning programs. One is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, I mentioned, administered out of the Department of Ed. Again, those are federal dollars from US Department of Ed specifically for after school and summer learning programs. Can't be used for anything else. That's what it's for. Georgia receives about $40 million each year, and in FY16 served 243 sites and over 27,000 kids. The other The other larger funding stream is through the Division of Family and Children's Services, their after-school care program. Georgia allocates $15.5 million of our TANF funds to serve after-school and summer learning programs. And again, that's 300 sites and approximately 25,000 kids across the state. This right here is a map, and in my opinion, it's a little bit of a sad-looking map. This is a map of not all after-school programs. This is looking at those two federal funding streams I just mentioned. All the gray counties are counties that don't have any of those programs. The darker the color, blue up to the top, is where there's the most programs. To kind of lay that out a little bit, it's 70 counties across the state have more than one program, but there's 62 counties across our state that don't have either of those federal funding streams supporting their county. And to give you a little bit more perspective on this access versus demand, and I'll actually call that participation versus demand, is that this current year, the Georgia Department of Education just announced who are the next round of recipients of the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, that program. This year, they received 87 applications for that program. It's a multi-year grant, so that's 87 applications for the new cohort. Because of how much funding we had, they were able to grant 33 of those, so it's a 38% acceptance rate. So there's a lot of local education districts, there's a lot of school districts, a lot of community partners who want these programs, but there's simply not enough funding for them right now. And so beyond this participation and our demand, the key piece that I was saying before about getting these high quality impacts is about the quality of the program. As I mentioned, there's a lot going on around the state and around the country to make sure that these programs are high quality. It's not babysitting. It's not just snack and basketball. There's so much more that they can and should be, both academic enrichment, social emotional learning, job readiness, getting them exposed to new careers. Some of the initiatives that are going on right now, the first one is the Georgia After School and Youth Development Quality Standards and Conference. That is an initiative that is funded by collaborative of state agencies, the Department of Education, Division of Family and Children's Services, and the Department of Public Health. It includes a self-assessment tool for programs to start to evaluate their own program quality and start improving it. And there's also a conference where nearly 800 after-school providers attend. It's a biannual conference to really get some of that high-quality training, see how to improve their program. Another one is through the Department of Early Care and Learning. We were just hearing it from them, and I know y'all are probably familiar with quality rated. But what you're probably not as familiar with is the school-age quality rated system that launched in 2015, and it is very similar to quality rated, but it's for standalone school-age programs. A lot of you probably don't know that the Department of Early Care and Learning does also serve children ages 6 through 12. They license after-school programs, they monitor them, and they're now starting to monitor their quality and go through the system similar to the quality rated you're familiar with for our early learners. And the third one is simply that we have a lot of supports across our state between GSAN, some of our nonprofit partners, as well as our agency partners, to be working with programs who are going through either of these processes or others who are just interested in improving their quality. We have training, both in person and an online learning platform for after-school providers. We have technical assistance supports that we've been piloting and are getting ready to start to scale those out on a larger scale to be coaching one-on-one with after-school providers on how they can really increase their quality. So this, I know I kind of flew through some of this, but this brings me to some of the recommendations that I want y'all to be thinking about as we're thinking about how we can best serve the young people in our state. Is I want to think really creatively about how we can expand public and private investments in these out-of-school time services, both after school and summer learning. There's a lot of creative ways we can do that, and we can talk about that, but just putting that out there. One way that I will put out in your head is what I mentioned earlier, is transportation. That is a very tricky catching point for a lot of programs. It's often hard to fund transportation with some of the funding streams that they have access to, and it's a big thing for families. Because if a school bus leaves at 2:45 and that's the only way to get your child home, then they can't stay for after-school supports whether or not they're available and if they need them. 2, I want to put out there, reimagine summer school. Summer is a very critical time, and this is my point of view, but with the school day, there's so much that the school can do. But sometimes the issue simply isn't dosage. Sometimes doing more of the same thing, for some kids, that's what they need. They need those couple extra hours. Some children, that's not going to necessarily solve the problem. So going through 2 more months of something that isn't meeting that child's needs still isn't going to meet their needs. There's been some interesting work across the country in really kind of bridging what you think of summer school and what you think of summer camp. Bringing those two together as a new, really hands-on, engaging way for kids to learn, allowing school districts to partner with those community partners to make it fun, make it enriching, and start to really get them back on grade level. And the third one is increasing participation in quality improvement initiatives. As I mentioned, there's the school-age quality rated, and there are the after-school and youth development quality standards and assessment tool. Both of them are fantastic, but they're not being utilized as much as they could be. And so I would encourage us to think about, 1, how to increase participation through public awareness. Part of the issue is people don't know about some of them. The other piece is thinking creatively about incentives. What can we do to really encourage these professionals who are serving our kids every day to start to really think hard about quality and how they can make sure their programs are the best? I will point out, if anyone has any questions specific to that program level, I am not best to answer those, but there is an after-school program in the back of the room who actually does receive funding from 21st Century Community Learning Centers and the after-school care program administered by DFACS. So they are also here today. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So
Yeah.
question to Katie. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question about, what about the 6th and 7th graders? Because I know that's always a challenge because they're kind of too young to participate in the sports or after school activities and might be getting in middle school. and then they're too old for decal with the CAP program and all that subsidized funding that some of the early learning centers receive on some of the other programs. So what are some of the things that you all looked at dealing with the middle school age?
Yes. Well, first I will say when I talk about these after-school programs, I meant to mention it earlier, I'm not just talking about our little ones in elementary school. I'm talking all the way through high school. One of the pieces that's in your folder, you will see that with the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, yes, the majority of the kids who are being served through those programs are elementary school kids, but there is 6,500 middle school kids and about 6,500 high school kids who are going to those programs as well. It's a different issue getting middle school and high school kids into the door. It's not the parents' decision at that point, it's the kids' decision. And so programs need to think more creatively about how they engage those kids, but I will say this quality piece, those quality programs don't have that much trouble getting these kids in. If they're serving high school kids and they're doing some really interesting job readiness skills, if they're providing internships. Some of these programs who are really rock stars on it, they don't have the issue with that. But it is harder than elementary school, absolutely. And it is a little bit, and on the point where you said, it's different than decal and the CAPS programs that serve the younger kids. That's also a lot of these quality initiatives, of course, not the school age quality rated, because that does only go up to age 12, since it's through the Department of Early Care and Learning. But the Georgia After School and Youth Development Quality Standards, those were written in mind for programs serving K through 12. And those can really serve as a framework for what high quality programs should look like to engage those kids.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Oh, I did have a question. Phil?
This isn't a question as much as it is, not a question as much as an observation, but I had the opportunity to ride down here with Katie this morning, so I got a 3-hour seminar on the subject, and I couldn't help but be struck by the fact, and back in 1999, I chaired the original Georgia Early Learning Initiative, JELLY, for those of you who are old enough to remember that first effort, which created the first effort to put quality rated systems in the state, which we actually did in a number of counties, and unfortunately it died when the administration changed. But I can remember back then having issues around convincing people of the importance of early learning, talking about the quality rating system for early learning, talking about the lack of awareness on behalf of parents of not understanding how important it was. And the parallels here are quite obvious, that we need to start, and this is part of a recommendation, we need to start thinking about after-school programs and summer programs the same way we think about early learning initiatives. That quality, and when we started back in 1999, there was no technical assistance for early learning centers. There was no requirements for other than what were Head Start federally funded. There were no credential requirements for the teachers, the instructors who were in early learning centers. They were basically child care centers for parents who didn't know what to do with their kids when they worked during the day. And it was a babysitting service, is basically the way we thought of it. Well, I think we're in that state now that a lot of people view after-school programs and summer programs as something that their kids can be in where they're safe while they're at work or while they're otherwise occupied. In reality, this can have the same impact on these kids. And I think about integrating some of the ideas of interventions into those after-school programs. What's to prevent us from having instructors in there that are doing reading instruction to help the intervention? And we talk about we don't have enough resources, but here we have a group of kids who are available, and teachers who aren't, and I'm not suggesting that the same, we double down on our teachers without treating them properly for doing so, but the opportunity to get to these kids in a different environment and continue what maybe they weren't able to do in the classroom or in school during the day. So my recommendation is we, as part of this, help redefine the importance of after-school programs and the potential that they have, and also start doing some of the longitudinal studies that can then demonstrate that kids who are exposed to after-school and summer programs have a better trajectory, a better outcome than the kids who are not, just like we do in early learning right now.
So if you can say that one more time, Phil. So the recommendation would be to?
Basically create the awareness of the importance of after-school programs, and then to look at creating the data that demonstrates the effectiveness of those in long-term outcomes.
Okay.
The other thing we talked about is those of you who had college experiences, and think about what you learned in the classroom and what you learned socially and emotionally and everything else outside of the classroom. And show of hands, who thinks they learned more when they were in college from being in the classroom than they did just about life in general by being alone, or not, at least away from your normal environment and learning to live with other people in other environments? I would guess, and it looks it's that way, you learn more from the social experiences and the interaction and what you get out of that. And that's a lot of what this program gives to those kids too. It's not just about academics, it's about learning to be with other kids, being in a different environment and functioning successfully.
We take a look at evidence-based programs. There's a lot of talk about what works, and I've heard a lot of talk about what works. What I don't know is what works. I just heard a program that had a 6% difference, you said, in your program, at fourth graders. If there were 500 kids, you started out with at 46%, 220 were on level, and at 38%, 190 were. So that's 30 students that you made a difference in reality, with striving readers. Is that the best bang for the buck that we're going to get? And if it is, then let's invest in that. But if it's not, let's find how we achieve even better results. And what I would love to see is, what are the best practices? What are the best programs that we can invest in to achieve the effects that need to be. If we've got 46% of fourth graders that aren't on reading level, we ought to be sending the emergency crew out to do something. You know.
So this is a very short lesson, and I won't lecture, I promise. But so when we say using the milestones assessment, beginning, developing, proficient, and distinguished, that is a demonstration of where those kids sit relative to the standards they're supposed to learn and their same age peers. That is supposed to align then to the NAEP normed assessment. And in norm, remember when you were in stats and you did the normal curve, okay? So if you're at grade level, then that means you are about at the 50 percentile of your normed peers. So we would not expect 100% of kids to be above grade level, because that would be statistically impossible. Does that make sense? So on the milestones, when we say we have, 65% that are proficient and above, or I guess it's developing and above, that's considered grade level standard for comparable to the NAEP. And that is also comparable in the Lexile scores. So the Lexiles are another scoring mechanism on the milestones that also norm to everything. So we have about 65% normed proficiency. So that's actually really good. The issue for Georgia is that we have to reach the kids who are on that 35%. So when we talk about reaching that bottom level, that is a more difficult population to reach. If you were thinking of this as like a healthcare issue, it would be people with more significant healthcare needs. So rather than just providing wellness and prevention, we're now providing intervention. So getting a better, a better life rate means that we're actually doing okay. The other thing I want to mention is that it's not going to take just one program. And I hope what you're hearing here when we talk about networked services and supports is that it's going to take instructional interventions, but it's going to take that in concert with community coalitions. Because our kids aren't just in school and they're not just outside of school. They're in both places. So we're really trying to coalesce the educators and our out-of-school folks, or folks who work in healthcare, or folks who work in social services. All of us are trying to work together. That's that good to great for social sectors. That's what we're really trying to do.
We asked Caitlin to come into the advisory committee. Remember, for those of you who aren't familiar, there's two parts of this effort. There is the advisory committee of folks like Caitlin and other technical experts who are helping us with this issue. And then there is the commission, which is formulating and responding to recommendations from the advisory committee. Caitlin came in and there were a number of, actually they're alphabetized, recommendations, I think there were around 14 of them, that the advisory committee said, after hearing Caitlin, here's some quick brainstormed ideas. So I just want to let you know that that's kind of a feeder. The other piece was the presentations today should have helped you formulate those recommendations, and you were given a few minutes while we transitioned to kind of write those things down. As we have this discussion about recommendations, we really tried hard to put some structure around this, and we found that we kind of over-structured some things, but know that we have some categories for recommendations, and we have operational definitions of what those categories are. So for example, one of the categories is investment or funding. One of the categories is awareness. One of the categories is organization and leadership. So we're not asking you to categorize your recommendation, but if you have a one-word title, if you were to say, hey, I really think this is all about communicating to someone, or I really think this is all about getting more resources in the form of paraprofessionals or teachers, give us that one word or that one title. The other thing that we're going to ask you to really think about is to be as specific as possible. We love recommendations that are visionary, like reimagine summer school. That's compelling, right? But it lacks the specificity. Now, she knows the specifics behind it. We know that she knows that. And that recommendation will get formulated, it will be formulated that way. But the more specific you can be with your recommendation, the better. Third thing, and this is something that typically recommendations we struggle a little bit, is what do you want the outcome to be? What's your desired outcome? So if you reimagined summer school, and you were talking about the summer slide, and you say, listen, I have some data that proves if we have access through transportation to these reimagined summer school experiences, and we can stop the summer slide by X percentage, here's the desired outcome. The more specific we can be, and your desired outcome would be perfect. The recommendation process is not only open to the commission, but those of you who have joined the commission in supporting them. And we can start where you want to go. And again, Joy's going to record. I'm going to facilitate the conversation. Sandra's also going to record. So thinking about today and the opportunity you had to write down your recommendations, there's probably something top of mind. It's the one thing that you want to say, hey, if we only did this, if we focused on this, it may be a prioritization, it may be near and dear to you, it may be something that you think will solve more than one problem. It is that one key recommendation. So let's open up the conversation. As you thought about the presentation today, what's one recommendation that you would like to make for the commission to consider? Yes, sir.
But financing summer school would be a wonderful step in the right direction. If we had funds for summer school, I could promise you, with the people in this room, we could make it happen in Tift County. Okay. So not only reimagining summer school, but financing summer school. We spend most of our federal funds not most of our federal funds. Most of our summer school is funded by federal funds, and it's very limited in the access that we give our students. Summer school is a very, very good place to start. Reimagine summer school and finance summer school. And if you want to pilot in Tift County, we would be welcome to take that pilot opportunity if you come up with those funds for a pilot. We've got the people in the room to make it happen.
Knowing what you know about the funding mechanisms, and so I'm hearing you say that the majority of your funding comes from federal funds right now. Where would those other funds come from?
The majority of funds we use for summer school come from what occurred. The state did many years ago and have made an increased motion in the last several years to decrease those, because we had 20 additional day money from the DOE many years ago, and that money was blended in to help us offset the austerity cuts in years past, and those austerity cuts are reducing. The funds that we currently receive from the DOE, we earn, it's very complicated formulas. We won't go into that process today. If we had funds specifically designated solely for the purpose of summer school to stop the summer slide, that would be where I would start, not giving us the money. I wouldn't carte blanche give a school system money, hey, here's an extra $1 million, do what you want. If you're looking for someone to really go at a summer school, reimagine summer school, give the money for summer school specific, make us tell you what we're going to do with it. If you're going to give us the money, have some expectations and give us a shot at it. But summer school is a wonderful place to start because we do have summer slide. The majority of our students who are at or below grade level do not have access to summer school. It is relegated specifically for many of your public school systems charge fees for summer school, and if the student can't afford it, they don't go to summer school. So we only afford summer school for our middle and upper level students. Our summer school access for primary age students is limited if nil.
Okay, so would the priority go to where it's underfunded, right?
Priority go to primary school first.
Perfect. And then what one thing would you say, listen, I could bet that this would be the outcome. This is what I can imagine the outcome being if we were to fund that way.
If I could take this select group of students in let's take second and third grade, and they were below average reading, we could take them and I guarantee we could increase by 10% the number of students reading on grade level in one summer. If we had them with the right teachers, the right group size, the right materials, and had them where we wanted them for a period of time. We could definitely show improvement with the right opportunities. Patrick Atwater, Superintendent.
I'm Patrice Perkins Hooker. I had 2 points. One is we need to fully fund the new student-based formula that the Educational Reformation or Renovation Group came up with, because that's important and it has components for poverty as well as English as second language enhancements. And then I wanted to recommend that we use unallocated lottery proceeds to fund after-school learning programs and summer school programs for the most at-risk students.
Perfect. And as you think about those different funding mechanisms, what specific outcomes are you looking to accomplish? More so than just funding a program, what do you believe would happen if we invested that money?
Well, you all have convinced me through the materials I've read, what you all have been prolifically providing to us, is that we have to intervene early in children's development. But we don't have the abilities and the resources throughout the state, including the poverty belt as well as the urban areas, to have the type of tutoring, educational enrichment, support programs both after school and during the school. Even this person back here, the assistant principal, mentioned, if you just give me a couple other people, I could use it. So the excuse has always been, we're not going to get any more money from the state. I'm going to take that at their word. But we do have money that the state has collected from other people from lottery proceeds. I think the last time I saw was in excess of $500,000. $500 million. So that's a lot of money just sitting. And so there are a lot of needs, and I would prioritize what you all have already determined does work.
Thank you.
So as we think about funding, one of the things that I want to highlight is trying to get the corporate sector's buy-in by stating the business case, right? Helping the corporate sector to understand the business case for ensuring that we have a literate workforce. Second thing that I want to highlight is, as we talk about, I heard through your presentation, you talked about all of the books that were given out. But my question is, are we incentivizing, are the children actually reading the books? And as I think about my childhood, there was Book It, right, through Pizza Hut. And if you read 10 books, you got 10 books a month, you got a free pizza. And so that really incentivized me to read on a monthly basis. So again, that's another opportunity for corporations to provide resources through their, whatever it is, a pizza, right? Whatever it is that they can provide through their organization. So those are my 2 recommendations from a funding and an incentivization.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Full. As we think, remember that our topic, because we've covered summer school, we've covered funding, we've covered corporate participation. If you have anything specific to 4th through 12, it's important to call that out now, since that's our topical area. Amy?
So mine is a 2-word title, and it's Good Enough. And the specific recommendation I would have around the summer slide issue is to identify areas where there is a organized, consistent gathering of children that already occur. Okay. So I'm gonna, if with your permission, I will go to a Christian faith-based example, because that's what I'm familiar with, and that's Vacation Bible School, or even Sunday School, and go to the developers of the curriculum and all of that kind of stuff and ask them to start to embed literacy as a priority and how that is delivered. A lot of VBS programs are delivered by teachers in the off-season, and so if you can do that, again, this is not, I don't expect us to ask VBS to be quality rated, but these people do a really good job of delivering highly engaging curriculum to children, and if literacy is embedded into that, if it's letter recognition books, whatever, then it becomes more integrated, right? It doesn't have to be a formal after-school program. It's just completely integrated and becomes integrated in what we do as a society, and that would be the desired outcome.
Yeah, just as you described that, imagining scouting, sports, all those opportunities where people are together, where you can teach literacy.
So around the partner, Tracy Camby's with Deloitte, around the partnership theme, I agree we have to have both incentive as well as the ROI, kind of showing back to the commercial and private sectors. But around the 4th to 12th grade, I really feel like we need to think about, because after 4th grade, they're reading to learn before learning to read before 3rd grade, and then after that point, it's reading to learn. And in order to get them thinking that way and students engaged in that, and they're doing like in the middle school, you're saying you get teachers who are specialized in science and social studies, but literacy isn't necessarily embedded. So how do we embed that and create programs through partnerships that actually it's part of an after-school program where partnerships from the community, from private sector are offering opportunities to students to apply not only the subject-based learning, but apply literacy in an activity of some sort, just some sort of engagement that can happen that's beyond the classroom, because it's putting it in practice. And between 4th and 12th grade, it's about putting the education that you're receiving and whatever level you're able to consume it and apply it. It's about applying it, because that's when it really sticks. And then they hopefully would start also feeling self-incentivized and seeing their own improvement by learning something different or applying the science, social studies, reading, ELA in a different way. My second recommendation is I feel like we need to do, it's all around the digital access. And I think we need to understand, particularly in the rural parts of Georgia, what is really the level of access digitally that families have. I don't feel like we have enough information at our fingertips right now. I mean, as a part of the original study, we started to look at some of that. I spend my life in technology day in and day out with corporations. I know what the numbers of personal devices that sit in the hands of the average consumer and even the below average consumer that doesn't have enough discretionary funds, but I know discretionary spending is actually being driven towards digital devices, personal devices, versus having a home phone connected, providing broadband at the home. So I think that we need to understand more of that landscape so that we can understand how to better apply digital technologies to these families and these students at whatever level we believe will be the most engaging. Because I believe the program that Tift County has rolled out is amazing with the Chromebooks. You can put a ton of content on a Chromebook and have them work on it at home, but if they don't have a digital connection in some way, how can they connect with the teacher or their tutors that might be available through after-school online tutoring if we don't have a digital connection? It doesn't have to be a broadband. Sure. Right? And so what are the numbers that we need to know around that, so that actually maybe some of the private funding could be steered towards grants of some sort for creating those digital access points around that one. So that was my two.
So, and then I'd just like to mention, because we did talk about strengthening the business partnerships, we talked about that, I second, third, that, but also because at the secondary level, we are so focused on content. To provide our schools, for schools to have the resources of having a content, a literacy-focused academic coaches who can support our teachers on those with those literacy strategies at the secondary level. Because again, our teachers at the secondary level are more so content specialists, but they don't have the skills to support our students all the time with those literacy strategies that they need.
And what outcomes would you see if you prepared subject matter experts in those literacy strategies?
Well, better readers, being able to access the curriculum on grade level content.
Explicit vocabulary instruction, explicit comprehension instruction. These are all things that we can do with upper grade level children that we know will affect their literacy outcomes and their content knowledge in other subjects. And I want to piggyback on the digital access issue. We do have some maps of Georgia, but they're not complete, so amen. And then also, I've heard of some really innovative programs where they'll put digital access on school buses, because a lot of our rural kids have really long bus rides. And you can put a satellite access point on a school bus, have them have access during the school ride, and then park the bus out in the community, and then you have an access point in the community as well. It's pretty cheap, and it provides access in a place where we don't currently have 3G or 4G.
Just add to have somebody along that could tutor those kids while they're on the bus so if they got stuck.
My name's Sarah Fletcher, and my recommendation is for us to get a better understanding of what's happening at the high school level, because today we've talked a lot about elementary. We've also had 0 to 8 again, and we're going into adult literacy at our next meeting, and I feel like we're missing this really important gap that's high school students. And I know we talked about it, and she made the recommendation about instructional coaches, but what else do we need to be doing to prevent the adult literacy next step that we're going to be talking about in the next meeting? And what information does this commission need to know about that topic in order to make recommendations to affect change in I'm even going to put middle school into that, because I know here you guys have, I think it's 6th and then 7th and 8th grade, but what's happening at those levels to support this issue? And in order for us to make recommendations for this age group, we need to have more information about it.
So the original idea in grouping 0, right, from birth to 3rd grade was where the assessment happens, and then from 4th to 12 was to complete the rest of the grades. So specifically, are you recommending further segmentation of grades so that you can understand what's happening?
I'm just saying we need to be talking about it. We haven't talked about, we've had just a couple comments about the high school and what can be done there, and we've talked a lot, and I know that's because there's a lot of elementary school folks in the room, and that's where the resources right now are. But what's the gap at high school? Okay. How can we make a recommendation to solve this throughout the educational spectrum if we don't understand what the challenges are at that level?
Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Annalisa Thomas from TCSG. I just wanted to ditto the secondary, the instructional support and the adolescent literacy issues. And also I just wanted, as I'm listening to all the issues about digital literacy, I would say that as an instructor, I think then we would need to enhance the instructional technology professional development opportunities for teachers so that they can provide actual authentic learning experiences for children. It's not like a go online and check a calendar type experience. It's a real learning experience so that children can use technology independently in the workforce. So I think that's the disconnect there is an instructional technology in addition to literacy. So not to create a whole new commission or anything, but.
Great, thanks for that recommendation.
I would like to recommend, since we talk about there's a shortage with literacy and graduation coaches, is maybe also looking at our communities, which might have volunteers that may be willing to go through the training for literacy and graduation coaches.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I really don't have a recommendation, but a lot of what we do in our E3Zs is we're challenged to design or pilot innovative ideas for the rest of the state. So I'm sitting here listening, and you're talking about meeting people where they are and embedding literacy strategies, and I think, what about the ball games? What could we do at the ball games where all of these kids and families are together? What kind of literacy strategies could we implement there? just a thought, so.
Just want to piggyback on the superintendent around the summer and reimagining summer school piece. Beyond the, he was talking about, it's just federal funding that's specifically allocated for summer. What can we do as a state? But also beyond state, also private. Think about how we can partner with some of the community partners and make that summer school that engaging place where it's not just school, but school and the local Y, or school and the Parks and Rec coming together to make it educational. You're getting the literacy rates up, but you're also engaging them in a different way. And we were also talking about, some of those counties that do have a 21st Century Community Learning Center grant, or the ones through DFACS, thinking creatively about how we can braid and really leverage some of those opportunities to make it one larger program serving more young people through both activity and literacy.
Good, thank you. So we got on a roll with these recommendations, and I have to imagine that you're going to have more after you leave the session. So the best way to get recommendations to the advisory committee or to this group is through Joy. So we need to wrap up. First of all, a great appreciation for all of you who came because you were invited. It's one thing for us to show up because we're expected to be here. It's another thing for you all to come because you were invited. So thanks very much for being here. Hopefully it was of value to you to understand what's going on in the state of Georgia. And for those of us who were asked to be here, and especially our presenters, thank you very much for your content, your expertise, your talent, and your contribution to the great state of Georgia. All right? And for those of you who don't know, I don't live here anymore. But let me tell you what, coming from my mom's house in Albany to here, I just remember fondly how I love this state. So thank you for everything you're doing in the state. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Deal just for a couple closing comments, and then we'll get you all out of here.
Well, we just want to say thank you to everybody who came today, because we know you are interested in our students, interested in our state, interested in having good workers who can make this a great state and improve the opportunities for them to have the jobs that have been brought to this state, because we want to see it be successful. And so we thank you all for everything you're doing. I know these schools right here in Tifton because I've been to visit. I've observed your reading recovery programs. I know how hard you're working. I know that some of those programs have changed, and we change with the programs. And I know that as a teacher, we have to sort of be flexible and go with what we're given. When the money runs out, you run out of that program and start another one. But, we take the best of what we've learned and we share it as much as we can with others. And, every little step makes a difference. We make a little bit of progress. We'd like to make giant steps, but sometimes that's not as possible as we'd like. But we are doing what we can do. And we especially need to be aware that, of course, the foundation is key, but then we have to continue to get our young people involved. And that means having people who are interested in them and who mentor them. A machine just doesn't do the same thing as a person. And so we want to do what we can as individuals and encourage other people to do so also. And share your information. Do what you can. That's all we can ask. We know we tried our best and did what we could. But we want to do more as we have the opportunity. So thank you so very much for coming, and thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you for being here.